Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. So the rapper Lil Nas X has a music video where he's giving Satan a lap dance. And in real life, he's selling Satan shoes made with a drop of blood and a pentagram. All right, Lil Nas X, I'll bite. First of all, I know what you're doing here. All right, I get it. Right? Artists need to do stuff like this from time to time to get a rise, get that rise out of us Christians. And then Christians say something like, hey, this probably isn't great for children. And then they come back with, oh, you Christians, you're so uptight. Why are you so obsessed? Oh, Christians, you always overreact. Why are you judging? Ooh, you Christians, you judge. You're judging me. Why you judge? You judge all the time. Judge. You need to be more loving. Where's the love? Why aren't you judging? You're judging to me. They do this. I get it. I get the game. All right? It's very difficult to get people's attention today. It's very hard to get people's attention. And that's what Lil Nas X just did. Right? You do something shocking and absurd and grotesque to get people's attention, and then conservatives talk about how terrible it is, and then people on the left talk about how wonderful it is, and blah, 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 the whole thing, right? You break through, you get attention, people Google the video, they watch the video, you get a view, you get money. I know how it works, all right? Lil Nas X. Still, I'll bite. Because I'm an adult. I understand the difference. I understand the game you're playing. I understand you're an actor doing a part, okay? Kids don't. Many parents don't see the game. And they don't see a problem with what you're doing. So I got a message to parents here. Parents, if you are not actively taking the reins of raising your kids, then someone else is. Someone's raising your kids. Is it you? Do not outsource the raising of your kids to people who hate you and people who hate your worldview. If you outsource this God-given responsibility of raising your kids to the TV, people who hate you and your values are writing TV shows. They're raising your kids. They're writing movies and video games and everything on the internet. You're giving the control over your kids' hearts and souls to people who you would never leave in the same room with your kids. For $1. Right? They're doing it for $1. But I'm just lame-o super prude over here. Lame-o Christian. Oh, Slater, why are you getting so uptight? So background here, if you're not up on this, Lil Nas X is a rapper. He's famous for the song a couple years ago, Old Town Road, which was this annoyingly catchy rap country crossover. I hated it then, and I warned you then. We didn't have a show back then, but on the radio show, I said, hey everyone, this song sucks. And I'll get to it in a minute, why that's important. But we're supposed to love it. Right? So there was, it really hit me when I saw this video here. This is a video of Lil Nas X showing up, this is 2019, showing up at an elementary school. And as you'll see here, the kids are hypnotized. They are entranced, hypnotized. They've turned into like wild animals, singing along to every word. Now the chorus of Old Town Road, we haven't even gotten to the new song yet. The chorus of his original song is, can't nobody tell me nothing. You can't tell me nothing. Okay? Your inputs change your thoughts change your actions. You cannot tell me that pumping into a 5-year-old's brain, can't nobody tell me nothing, all day long to a catchy tune does not change their thoughts and therefore their behavior, and we wonder why kids don't respect their parents and teachers. For example, there was a ton of other bad stuff in this song, but no one cared, and then this happened. that's so messed up. That is so screwed up. That is so unbelievably disturbing. Jeez, my oldest son was like 2 when that came out. And it was such an amazing reminder to be careful about what my kids are listening to. Like the kids are up there screaming, can't nobody tell me nothing. And they like, what are we putting into our kids' brains? Someone wrote on Twitter, they said, the system is targeting kids. Lil Nas X's fan base is mostly children. Right, as you see right there, there's like 5-year-olds. And Lil Nas X, he responded, he said, there was no system involved. I made the decision to create the music video. I'm an adult. I'm not gonna spend my entire career trying to cater to your children. That's your job. Now, he's right about that, but don't be deceived. Check out this NPR headline. Lil Nas X says children are his core audience right now, and that's okay. That was when he was promoting a book called C is for Cowboy, I think, right? A children's book, like an alphabet children's book, saying his children are his core audience right now. That was from January, all right? 3 months ago. He knows that kids are his core audience. So imagine you're a parent, your kid likes Old Town Road, all right? So you let your kid subscribe to Lil Nas X's YouTube page, all right? Or, I don't know, let's say you saw Lil Nas X on Sesame Street last week. Sesame Street. And your kid follows Lil Nas X now because you've outsourced the raising of your children to Lil Nas X. And then out of left field, Lil Nas X comes back with this. You see how that works? They cater to your children, and then they pull the switcheroo on you. That is grooming your children. Oh, here's Slater on his high horse, his judgy high horse. Oh, why are you making such a big deal? You should be feeding your kids beautiful things. Now, the reason why Lil Nas X is popular with kids is because Old Town Road sucked. That song was catchy junk food. It was catchy pop junk. Old Town Road is a good song in the same sense that Oreos are good, but they're not good for you. What you feed your kids, the stories, the truths, the worldview, what you feed them about what matters in life and what to look for in life and what to strive for in life and what is good, beautiful, and true, I'd argue it's even more important than the actual food that you feed them. But we don't. We feed them this crap. If a song is catchy and your 5-year-old likes it, it's not good. It's not a good song. You should not let your 5-year-olds dictate what music they listen to and therefore you listen to. Who's in charge of your home? Give your kids beautiful things. Do an audit of what your kids consume. Philippians 4 says whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. Think about such things. Give your kids beautiful things. Do not hand them over to people like Lil Nas X who are trying to make a buck. Your kids are more valuable than that. Does that distinction make sense? Like a lot of people are like, oh, what's the big deal? It's just yeah, I don't care. 36, I don't care about Lil Nas X. He can do whatever Lil Nas X wants, okay? I don't give a crap about what Lil Nas X does. I'm worried about the parents who are not aware of their kids because an 8-year-old can't interpret this properly, okay? So some other rapper made a similar point that he pulled the switcheroo on kids. After catering to kids and going on Sesame Street, he comes out of left field with this. Now, Lil Nas X wrote back to this guy. He said, I literally sing about lean. Lean is it's cough syrup. It's prescription grade cough syrup and alcohol mixed together. So I literally sing about lean and adultery in Old Town Road. You decided to let your child listen. Blame yourself. Now, in an interesting turn of my segment here, I agree with Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X is very right. If you let your kids listen to Lil Nas X and Cardi B, you only have you to blame. That's not his fault. That's your fault. Now, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Don't forget that. Now, the new song, it's called Call Me By Your Name. The lyrics are horrific. Just Google them. Call Me By Your Name, by the way, is the name of a movie where I think it won an Oscar. It may have won an Oscar, where this young boy falls in love with an older gay man. And at one point, by the way, if there's kids listening, sorry, should have given a disclaimer at the top here. If your kids are listening, tune away for a minute. At one point in the book and the movie, the boy masturbates inside of a peach, and then the older man comes in and passionately eats it in front of him. Okay? Call Me By Your Name. People are celebrating this video because Lil Nas X is being his gayest self. Isn't that wonderful? The line that's most well known out of this song, and this is what he's throwing back at people. Kristi Noem fell for the trap that he set, right? Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, she comes out and she wrote a tweet about how this is bad for kids. And he comes, oh, you're governor, why are you wasting time with this, right? It's the act, right? So the line that he keeps throwing back at people is shoot a child in your mouth while I'm riding. It's one of the lines out of the song. I mean, every line is terrible, right? But shoot a child in your mouth. Okay, that is ejaculating in someone's mouth. Sperm equals child, right? So shoot a child in your mouth. That's what he writes back to the governor of South Dakota. Okay, and I'm supposed to accept this as a parent whose kids, right? And I'm told he's brave, and he's pushing boundaries, like any good artist, he's pushing boundaries. So listen, I'm not shocked. No one should be shocked. I'm grateful in a way. We are broken people in a fallen world, and at least Lil Nas X isn't as deceitful as others, right? I wish all the, let me say a Christian-y thing. I wish all the people ensnared by Satan's traps were as truthful about what they do as Lil Nas X. It makes it more obvious, doesn't it? Maybe Cardi B, although she's as gratuitous as they get too, but maybe someone who's not as flagrant can get past your radar into your kids' souls. That hopefully doesn't. So yeah, like I wish everyone was as that bold in their Satan worshiping, their act of Satan worshiping. So I'm not shocked and all that. Just remember, parents, that Theodore Dalrymple quote that we often share. He said that the point of communist propaganda is not to persuade or convince. The point of communist propaganda is to humiliate you. They tell you absurd things that you either are silent about or you repeat. And when you do that, you humiliate yourself. If you don't stand up to lies, then they can get you to do anything. You've been humiliated. If you let your children listen to Old Town Road 2 years ago, and certainly this song now, and continue to watch the filth that Hollywood and the rest are feeding your kids, they're humiliating you. That's the point. They're humiliating you. You stand by and you let them groom and abuse your children right in front of you. They're humiliating you, Dad. To the point now where there are dads who see this Lil Nas X video, give a lap dance to Satan, and their 8-year-olds watching, and they say, oh, that's fine. That man's been completely emasculated and totally humiliated. Protect your kids. Don't let the world lie to them, and don't let the world lie to you that you shouldn't really be the parent. Let Lil Nas X do it for you, right? No. Do not outsource your responsibility to love and raise your children. Thank you, Lil Nas X, for the friendly reminder. Coming up next, does the law in Georgia prevent people from drinking water while in line to vote? Give me a break. I'll tell you the true story next. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we've got to talk about Georgia bill SB 202. The opposite, it's voter reform bill. The opposite of that is H.R. 1 in Washington, D.C. That one's controlled by the Democrats. This is a post from Leonardo DiCaprio. He says, we stand with Michelle Obama, and when we all vote in the fight for equal access to our democracy and an end to voter suppression. And then there's a list of all these celebrities, half of whom I don't know, but it's like a weird mix, like Shaq and Faith Hill are in the, it's weird. So let's talk about SB 202. All right, so this is the Georgia voter reform bill. I make it a practice of not ever playing anything from MSNBC, but it's worth playing this Joy Reid clip because this is a very concise example of how Georgia's voting reform law is being characterized by the left. And what Joy Reid and the left is doing here is sending a warning to any other state that has the gall, the audacity to reform their voting process. This is the treatment that you'll be getting as well. Here it is.
Let's just be clear for everybody who's watching this right now. What Republicans are saying is they're going to make it torture for you to vote in line by having fewer machines, beat up machines, places where, in urban centers, places where black folks live, suburbs where black people live, make it impossible or torture for you to vote in line. And then they're going to make it impossible for you to vote by mail. They're going to lock off every way that you can vote. And then even if you survive all of those restrictions and you finally get your vote in, then they're going to say, ways out. We're just not going to count what you did because we don't like who you voted for, so we're just going to give it to the other guy. This is the end of democracy in America. This is the beginning of the South Africa strategy. This is minority rule. This is saying we will rule over the objections of the majority of the American people. This is the most serious thing that we've seen happen since the January 6th siege. It's another kind of siege. It is absolutely bizarre, and it is I won't say it's un-American. It's probably kind of in a way. it's old school American. It's Jim Crow American.
All right, so watch the propaganda. So torture was used twice, lock off, if you survive, end of democracy, South Africa strategy, it's a siege. All right, it's torture, torture. They're gonna torture you when you go vote. Maybe you've heard this line that they're gonna make it illegal, this bill in Georgia makes it illegal to drink water while you're waiting in line. This is from The Hill. Georgia law makes it a crime to give food or water to people waiting to vote. Joe Biden the other day called it sick. He said this law is sick. He said it's pernicious. He said it's an atrocity. You can't provide water to people standing in line, waiting to vote. That's the President of the United States saying that. Okay, so you wanna know what it really does? The reason I wanna share this story is because you're like, well, I'm not in Georgia, Slater, what do I care? Well, first of all, Georgia's a swing state, so it's pretty important that they reform their bills. Their voting process, but just how the media can just lie straight to your face. I guess you shouldn't be surprised. So they say you can't drink water while online, right? No one can give you water, you can't drink water. Okay. Here's what the bill actually says. SB 202. It says, no person shall solicit votes or distribute or display any campaign material, nor shall any person give, offer to give, or participate in the giving of any money or gifts, including but not limited to food and drink to a voter. This code, just to be clear, this code shall not be construed to prohibit a poll officer from making available self-service water from an unattended receptacle to a voter waiting in line. That's what the law actually says, Leonardo DiCaprio. So here's the truth. Here's how this works. You can still bring your own water. Crazy idea, right? They have these things. There's like, they're like, what would you call it? Maybe like a sort of like a bottle. Sort of like a bottle, like a top on it, you put some water in it. Like a bottled water. Write that down. Make some big money on that. Bottled water, you walk around with a bottle of water. You can still order food. Well, like you can order it. You call up Domino's or DoorDash and they'll come by, they'll deliver food for you in line if you want. If there's an entrepreneurial chap who's selling hot dogs, right? He's got his food cart and he's selling hot dogs, no problemo there, that's great. If you feel compelled to donate food to people who are waiting in line, while they're being tortured, you can do that too. You just first have to give it to a poll worker so that they can put it out for everybody for general use. Okay, that's all allowed in this law. So what does the law try to prevent? It tries to prevent someone from wearing a MAGA hat handing out Trump water. Or Biden supporters setting up a booth saying, hey everyone, free pizza, vote for Biden, while you're waiting in line. That's called electioneering. And it's been illegal forever. That's actually not true. It hasn't been illegal forever. The reason it is illegal is because back in the day, they used to hand out alcohol. They used to give out booze. So vote for our guy, here's some whiskey. And they said, oh, you can't do that anymore. So they started writing electioneering laws. This is very normal. Very normal. Like every state has it normal. And no one's dying of thirst. Minnesota has a flat out ban. It says no one except an election official, the person voting, or someone conducting an exit poll can be within 100 feet of the building, no excuses. So in that case, even the hot dog guy can't sell his hot dogs. New York, where Joy Reid lives. She's voted before, she's been tortured. The New York law says you can't hand out food, water, meat, or tobacco. Biden's home state of Delaware has the exact same law. This part already exists. 1998, the Supreme Court in Kentucky threw out the results. So the winner, he won by, I don't forget what race it was, but he won by 8 votes. And it was found out that he set up a stand and was giving out food and glad handing people within 500 feet of the building where they were casting votes. You can't do that. So the Kentucky Supreme Court in 1998 overthrew the results. They overturned the election over that. Okay? So the you can't drink water scare tactic is a total lie. Again, poll workers can hand out water. Poll workers can hand out water. Campaign workers can't. Make sense? Poll workers can hand out water. Campaigns can't hand out water. That's all that is. See how they lie to you? See how they manipulate and lie to you? That's so ridiculous. Now, here's the biggest one for me. It's the entire premise that Joy Reid put it, that Republicans want fewer machines, they want longer lines and torture you, the whole thing. Here's what the law says. By the way, these longer lines are usually in urban areas, which are controlled by Democrats. Okay, there's not a lot of Republican strongholds in Atlanta that are preventing black people from voting. Okay, the law says if in the previous election there were any lines that lasted longer than an hour, right? The state can override local control and do one of 3 things themselves. Okay, they can either add more poll workers, add more polling machines, voting machines, or add more precincts, more voting locations. Why? To decrease the length of the lines. The law says that the state can come in and identify these places. Hey, lines there were 3 hours in the last election. Okay, what can we do? Well, they're not fixing the problem on the local precinct level. So the state, we're going to come in. I'll tell you what. Let's split it up into 2 different voting locations. That way, the line will be half as long. Okay, we'll still be an hour and a half long. Okay, let's add a few more voting machines. A few more voting machines. Split it into 2 locations, and that way it won't be as long of a line. That's what the law does. Like, this is great. What's the problem? So this bill, it ends electioneering of people waiting in line by outlawing electioneering and eliminating the lines. And we're told this is voter suppression? Isn't that amazing how much they can just lie to you? Straight lie. And the president is lying, just lying to your face. So what's the outrage about this? The real outrage from the left is that you need an ID to vote. The same people, by the way, who want you to have a COVID vaccine passport to be able to get on a plane, they think it's the greatest atrocity known to man. It's sick, Biden says, that they may require you to have an ID to vote, even if IDs are provided for free. For free. How insulting to black people, truly. How insulting to black people that the black activists, the black leaders, Joe Biden, are saying you are too poor or too stupid to get yourself an ID to vote. Oh, it's Jim Crow 2.0. It's Jim Eagle. You're too poor. You're too stupid to figure out how to get a free ID so that we can make sure people only vote one time so that your vote actually counts. How am I the racist? How am I the racist for wanting each vote to count once and not be diluted by fraud? How am I the racist for thinking that a black person is fully capable of getting a free ID? But Joy Reid's the hero for saying, you know, black people, they just can't figure it out. Insane. It's SB 202. HR 1, by the way, in the federal government does the exact opposite of all this stuff, which is why that must not pass. All right, coming up next, there have been so many horrific stories lately. The DC carjacking, as we noted yesterday, and many others. I got some videos I want to play coming up next. What's the cause of all this? Well, let's strike the root. It's family and culture. But the next level is terrible policy, notably the often overlooked DAs. This is super important to understand the role of a district attorney. George Soros knows how important it is. That's why he's spending so much money on it. We'll talk about that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, there have been some just horrific, depraved acts that we've been seeing lately. I mean, we played the video of the DC carjacking in broad daylight from a 13 and a 15-year-old girl. Like, what? Here's a video from yesterday. New York City, this guy just rolls up and just punches and kicks in the head a couple times this 65-year-old woman for no reason, and then walks off. They got a good picture of him, though. Not to mention that security guard does nothing. We got another video here. This is from yesterday too, of some guy just beating down a guy on a subway and then just walks away, almost kills him. And you look at this stuff and you're like, what in the world? Just again, the depravity of it. So I like to strike the root. There's thousands hacking at the branches of evil for every one who strikes the root. So we strike the root and we talk about family and we talk about our culture. The next concentric circle out is policy. And the policy, we think it's set by politicians, like elected officials, or like, I should say like congressmen or city council members, but it's really not. There is so much discretion with the DA. As I introduce our next guest, I want to say one thing about George Soros. George Soros stopped giving money to congressional races. You give a bunch of money to a congressional race, they barely win, and they're one vote out of hundreds. So what are they really going to do, right? George Soros looked around and he said, what am I doing? Why don't I spend this money on DA races? District attorneys, no one's paying attention to these races. It doesn't cost a lot of money to win them. And when a DA wins, they have a ton of discretion as to what laws they can prosecute and which ones they don't prosecute. And that's why George Soros has been doing this nationwide. So our next guest from the Heritage Foundation, one of our friends, Zach Smith. Zach, how are you, brother?
I'm doing okay. Thanks so much for having me on, Mike.
Good to talk to you. First of all, is what I said fair about George Soros' involvement with DAs and why he put so much money and time in them?
Yeah, absolutely. You're seeing George Soros. You're seeing some other tech billionaires, Carrie Tuna, Brian Moskowitz, who made their money with Facebook, really investing a lot of time, money, and resources into winning these district attorney races around the country. And you hit the nail on the head, Mike. You know, a lot of these rogue DAs are really usurping the role of the legislature, declining to enforce laws that they just disagree with. And we're seeing the results of it around the country in that their cities are becoming less safe. You're seeing an increase in violent crimes. And unfortunately, this lawlessness is going to continue so long as these rogue DAs refuse to do their jobs and prosecute crimes and enforce the laws that are on the books.
So DAs, they're in charge of they're the prosecutors for the government, and they only have so much time, so many people, so much money. So there's always going to be discretion that DAs have on what we're going to prosecute and what we're not going to, what we're going to put more emphasis on or less emphasis on. And the police officers, they get the picture, right? If the DAs come back and say, hey, we're not going to prosecute carjackings, then, or whatever crime it is, then the police are like, well, we're not going to arrest people for that because they don't get charged with anything, so what's the point? So DAs have so much power. What kind of laws are these DAs not prosecuting anymore?
Well, you're exactly right, Mike. The DAs do have a lot of power, and there's always going to be some level of prosecutorial discretion. And so these rogue DAs are saying this is just an exercise of prosecutorial discretion. That's just not true. Historically, prosecutorial discretion is when you look at the facts of a particular case, you say in the interest of justice, you may dismiss it if it's, a young person with a first offense, if there aren't facts or evidence there to support a prosecution. That is prosecutorial discretion, not just declining to not enforce whole areas of the criminal code. So what kind of laws are they declining to enforce? Let me give you an example, Mike. In Boston, Rachel Rollins, the road prosecutor there, has a list of crimes that you can now commit in the city of Boston, and she won't prosecute. And under that list, someone can break into your home, be in possession of cocaine, and then resist arrest when police officers show up. And that person won't get prosecuted for any of those crimes so long as they said they initially broke in just to find a place to sleep or to get out of the elements. And so these are really radical policy positions. They're very serious crimes that are being declined to, that these road prosecutors are declining to prosecute in many instances. And again, we're seeing the results in the uptick in violent crimes that are occurring in many of these cities.
Yeah, there's a reason why there've been 95 carjackings in D.C. so far this year. If you asked me how many carjackings there were, and that's when someone's in the car and you put a gun to them and their head and you rip them out of the car. It's a carjack. If you asked me how many of those take place in America, I'd be like, I don't know, like 5 a year? Like that's like a crazy crime. And there's been 95 in D.C. this year, 23 by juveniles. I question whether or not the DA there ever charges those, right? There must be a reason why there's so many. Word must be spreading that you can carjack and get away with it.
Well, it's certainly a troubling trend. And, we've seen this in cities across the country. We see it with Kim Foxx in Chicago, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, and then really the most rogue prosecutor of them all, George Gascon, out in Los Angeles, where George Gascon has enacted a list of policy directives, special directives, where he essentially orders his deputy district attorneys not to seek enhanced penalties, even in the most violent and depraved crimes. And so, for instance, there was a father not too long ago who decapitated several of his children and then forced his other children to go look at the headless, lifeless bodies. And in that instance, under the terms of George Gascon's special directive, that father, if found guilty, George Gascon would not seek enhanced sentencing penalties for that individual. And we see this time and time again. Enhanced sentences aren't being sought against those who target law enforcement officers. It's not being sought against other very violent individuals. And then also with some of these policy directives where Gascon is seeking to unwind or re-sentence many individuals. And we're really going to see the ripple effects of these policies for many years to come. And I'm hopeful that the voters in Los Angeles County will recognize the dangerousness of these policies and really, work to encourage George Gascon to, change his ways and start doing his job and enforcing the laws as they're written.
I'm not hopeful. Sorry, Zach. The fact that San Francisco elected Chesa Boudin, who was raised by Bill Ayers of the Weather Underground because his two parents were in jail for murdering police officers, and then worked for Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and is an avowed Marxist and was still elected like a year or two ago as the DA in San Francisco. That doesn't bode well, at least for some of these cities. Maybe some will wise up. Go ahead. I don't want to ask. Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I'll say, there is some sign of hope. There's already a recall drive underway to recall George Gascon, even though he's only been in office a very short period of time. I think a lot of his policies are so radical and they've been implemented in such an aggressive fashion, even for the most violent criminals, that the citizens of Los Angeles County are waking up, realizing what a dangerous position George Gascon is taking in many of these cases. And so hopefully the recall, it certainly looks like it's gaining more traction than it has in the past.
What is the ideological root behind these DAs and then also the people who are funding these DAs? What's their utopian vision? What's driving this for them?
Well, I certainly think our criminal justice system is fundamentally flawed, that is systemically racist, that we have a mass incarceration problem, which I would, respectfully push back against all of those assertions. Our criminal justice system is not systemically racist. We do not have a mass incarceration problem. But what we do need is for these district attorneys to enforce the laws that are on the books, use the tools that the people through the state legislatures have given them, and do their job and make sure that the laws are evenly and justly enforced, and that justice is done in these cases where in many instances the victims are just being left unheard and left as an afterthought.
Zach Smith, Heritage Foundation. Zach, thanks for covering this, DAs. Can we stay in touch about Gascon?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, It's not just Gascon. This is a movement across the country. And so there's definitely a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. Let's definitely talk again, man. I would argue that the ideology behind these people is that the criminals are the victims. And if you come at it from that perspective, then punishing them is the wrong thing to do. And I love how Zach pushed back on there's not a mass incarceration problem. I mean, these videos that we started off the show with, and there's so many of these crimes, these people have all been in jail before, that they shouldn't be on the streets at all now. And so many of the real victims wouldn't have been victimized again. It's ridiculous, these DAs. George Soros has maybe a 10-year head start on us, but we're now paying attention to these races. We can't let these happen again. Coming up next, we're talking about the Green New Deal, how it's hidden inside the infrastructure bill, the $3 trillion bill. We'll do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, do not be fooled. The new $3 trillion infrastructure bill, it's the Green New Deal, or at least the next giant step towards getting it in its fullness. Mark Morano is here. He's the founder of ClimateDepot.com, which if you haven't been to, you need to check it regularly, and the brand new book, Green Fraud, Why the Green New Deal is Even Worse Than You Think. Mark, how are you, brother?
Very good, Mike. Thank you for having me on.
Man, grateful for all the work you've done over the years. Being a climate change denier, you evil, horrible, terrible person. But exposing the truth on this, man. You've done a wonderful job, so I'm really grateful.
Thank you very much.
Let's just start there, okay? Someone says, Mark, you're a climate change denier, or do you really deny that the climate is changing? What's your initial rebuttal to that?
Absolutely not. Climate has changed since the beginning of time. And people say, has it warmed? Do you believe in global warming? Well, we've warmed since the 1970s global cooling scare. We've warmed since the end of the Little Ice Age in 1850. We've probably been the same or actually cooled since the end of the medieval warming period in 1300 AD. And we probably cooled since the Roman warming period of 0 AD. And the geologic history of the Earth, we're in one of the coldest 10% periods of Earth's history. So yes, I believe in climate change. The question is man-made. And yes, I believe humans can contribute, but I don't think it's distinguishable yet from natural variability. And I present scientists in the book who present that. And I have UN data and government data and all kinds of climate data showing storms, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, sea level, and polar bears, et cetera, are not on, and they're actually improving on climate timescales. The storms are getting worse. Storms are getting lower in incidence, and the polar bear numbers are at or near record highs.
But the science, Mark, the science. How are we supposed to look at that, right? What do we do? How should we look at the role of scientists or science in this debate?
Well, you look at one of the things they do is they talk about 97%. So they immediately don't want you to think about the science. Climate activists don't have to think. All they have to know is 97% of all scientists. Al Gore says it's 99. I feature United Nations lead author scientist in my book saying and debunking the idea. He says that is, quote, literally pulled from thin air, the 97% scientists agree claim. And it's based on another survey, 77 anonymous scientists. We don't know their names. It's absolutely designed to shut down debate. Yes, you believe in science, you believe in dissent, you believe in debate. The other side doesn't allow that. They deplatform, defund, censor, silence. And we're seeing it in COVID, by the way. One of the lead epidemiologists, Michael Levitt, was uninvited from a scientific conference because he didn't agree on lockdowns. And soon we're seeing the other scientists in COVID get deplatformed, censored. Same thing has been happening in climate for decades, to the point where they say, where are your scientists? You know, I present my scientists, but that's what they're going to do in COVID as well. They're going to shut down dissent and then claim there's no dissent.
Yep. Before we get to the Green New Deal, I think there's two types, and maybe it's on a spectrum, but generally there's two types of climate people. You have like your neighbor who wants clean water and clean air. Okay, great. And then you have the activists. What's motivating the activists? What's the ideology behind what's driving them to do these things?
Well, it's a good question. Now, there's different levels of the activists. If you're talking about your neighborhood activist, your young person, it's an ideology where they've been told since they were in kindergarten. I have a whole chapter on how youth indoctrination. They've been told since they were in kindergarten that the earth is finished, that humans are essentially a parasite on the earth, that everything from overpopulation to pollution to climate change has destroyed their future and there's no hope. This is why they're skipping school. This is why they're joining lawsuits against the federal government. This is why kids are testifying in front of Congress that mom and dad destroyed the planet. So they're true believers. If you go higher than that, though, if you're defining climate activists to include Al Gore and United Nations officials, you get less true believer and more, this is an ideological vision of the world, and they're just using the climate scare to achieve it. In my book, I go to great lengths to show you that whether it's overpopulation fears in the 60s or global cooling scares in the 70s or other environmental fears, the solution's always the same. This is about an agenda, and it's about using people, young people chiefly, to achieve these ends, and they're trying to use these tipping points. We only have 10 years to act, no time for debate, just to rush everything in. They couldn't otherwise get these progressive, essentially socialist central planning policies in without the cover of some environmental scare. Previously global cooling, overpopulation, now climate change.
So give me one of those policies that, so they have the ideology, which is power and control, right? Generally, right? So power and control, they want to enact this utopian policy and they do it by fear. So what is one of those policies?
Well, yeah, first of all, I just want to say it is power and control, but it's a worldview ideology where free people, free minds, free markets, free movement of people is harmful to the planet and devastating, and we need to stop this. And I go back to the 70s to show that. But the policies are very simple. A sovereignty limiting international treaties, wealth redistribution, central planning of our lives, massive regulation on every aspect of our lives. We saw, and I do a COVID climate connection, but we saw with the COVID lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, curfews, limits on backyard barbecues, your neighbors could snitch on you. We saw all of those things, airline travel collapsing, kids staying home from school. Well, now with climate version of that, there are actually people saying in a climate emergency, which they're urging Joe Biden to declare, Senator Schumer, you're not going to be able to fly unless it's, quote, morally justifiable. Just like you can't go out of your house and stay at home orders under COVID unless you have a reason to some police officer or bureaucrat. So this is their end game, is to essentially remake society in this sustainable way. And yes, they will be in power, but I think it's more of this ideology that's encompassing them. And that's what's happening with the United Nations, with the World Economic Forum. It's infected the EU now, where the EU has the European version of the Green New Deal. But in short, the Green New Deal is literally a bureaucrat managing every aspect of your life and you having to justify something that is against their plan and narrative. And again, for your viewers, think COVID lockdown. The parallels are incredible. I spend 2 chapters in the book detailing how the activists are lusting after the COVID lockdowns. They're jealous, climate activists. They say, if we can do that for a virus, why can't we do it for the climate?
Wow. That's so obvious. Just what you mentioned about the planes. I say it's obvious. I didn't see it until you just said it. But the airlines, that's so right. That parallel is so clear. All right, we got 30 seconds. Give me is there a lot of Green New Deal stuff in this infrastructure package?
Yes, what Biden is doing is every agency is a climate agency, including Department of Transportation. His old administration with Obama actually looked at fatal car accidents going up due to global warming. But they're redefining infrastructure now to include racial equity, environmental justice, all kinds of things that have nothing to do traditionally with infrastructure. But they're doing that with every agency. This is the stealth implementation of the Green New Deal executive order. They're going to go after it financially, too, stopping banks from lending to any fossil fuel companies. Wow. We are in for it. And this book, I have a whole blueprint of the entire book, and I made this fun to read and interesting. This is not a wonkish book. I think people will be entertained. I even get into how they want to add climate change as a cause of death on your death certificate. And this is a way you can have daily death tolls. Bill Gates is all in. He says that the death toll from climate change will far exceed anything from COVID-19.
Wow. Mark Morano, man, great for you. ClimateDepot.com, but go buy the book, Green Fraud, Why the Green New Deal is Even Worse Than You Think. Mark, appreciate you, brother. Great stuff.
Thank you,
True
Mike.
story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.